Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed friends, in this world of constant flux, there is one thing that remains certain: the human struggle to find peace, joy and meaning in life. We live in an age where distractions and temptations abound, and at the same time, many of us are seeking solace through means that promise temporary relief but ultimately take us further away from the truth of who we are. One such temptation is drug addiction. It might begin as a means to escape pain, to drown out the noise of the mind, or to simply seek a momentary sense of joy. But the momentary becomes the permanent, and in the pursuit of relief, we lose something far more precious, the essence of our own being. Addiction, no matter the substance, is not just physical, it's a profound disconnection. A disconnection from our own thoughts, our own feelings, and most importantly, our own ability to be present. In the haze of addiction, we lose our balance, and in that loss, we lose touch with the natural state of peace and clarity that lies within us all. But there is a path out. There is a way to break free from the chains of addiction, but it begins with introspection, the willingness to look inward, to ask, what am I running from? Why am I seeking something outside of myself to fill an emptiness within? This inquiry, this deep examination of the mind and heart, is where true transformation begins. When we are willing to be honest with ourselves, to face the uncomfortable truths about our lives, we can begin to restore the balance that has been lost. It is not about seeking a quick fix, but about finding a path that leads us toward lasting peace, fulfillment and joy. This is the path of balance. Balance is not a state of constant pleasure or constant happiness. It is the ability to remain centered amidst life's ups and downs, to experience both joy and pain without being overwhelmed by either. It is the recognition that we are not our thoughts, our emotions or our circumstances, but something far deeper, an essence of life that is always at peace. As we embark on this journey, we must remember that healing takes time. It is not an overnight process, but a continuous unfolding of self-awareness and self-compassion. We must be gentle with ourselves, yet firm in our commitment to change. So let us take a moment today to look within. Let us ask ourselves, what is the source of our suffering? What would it mean to reclaim our balance? To rediscover the peace that has always been there, waiting for us to come home? With courage and clarity, the road to freedom from addiction is not just possible, it is within your reach. The human struggle for peace and meaning is as old as humanity itself. From the moment we gain consciousness, we start searching for something more, something beyond the simple acts of survival. We yearn for fulfillment, for a sense of purpose, and for an inner peace that remains unshaken by the constant turbulence of life. Yet, in a world filled with distractions, expectations and external pressures, this quest often feels elusive. In today's society, the noise around us is deafening. The endless bombardment of information, social comparisons, and expectations often drown out the voice of our own inner wisdom. We are constantly pulled in different directions, trying to meet standards, chasing material success, or seeking validation from others. These external pursuits can lead us to believe that peace and meaning lie in something outside ourselves, whether it's a promotion, a relationship, or the latest gadget. But with every achievement, the satisfaction is often fleeting. The moment of triumph gives way to the next goal, the next desire, leaving us perpetually in pursuit, never fully arriving. This external chase for peace and meaning often masks the deeper longing that resides within us all, a longing for connection to something more fundamental, more enduring and more real. We seek relief from discomfort, from confusion, from a deep-seated feeling of emptiness that we may not fully understand. In these moments of uncertainty and yearning, the search for meaning intensifies. But this search can also lead us down paths that offer only temporary solutions, substances, distractions, or temporary fixes that promise to quiet the mind, but in reality, they only numb us further from the truth. It is not that the search for meaning is misguided, but rather that we often look in the wrong places. We forget that peace and meaning do not exist as external commodities waiting to be attained, they are already within us. This realization, however, requires a deeper kind of inquiry. It requires us to go beyond the surface level of desires and distractions, and to truly turn inward to understand why we seek what we seek, and whether it truly leads us to the peace we long for. In this struggle, many find themselves trapped in cycles of consumption, escapism, and addiction, whether to substances, relationships, or even thoughts. We become so accustomed to seeking relief from external sources that we lose touch with the simple truth: peace comes from within. The struggle then becomes not just one of finding meaning in the external world, but of reconnecting with the inner essence of who we are. The struggle is not one of chasing something unattainable, but of recognizing what has always been there within us, just waiting to be realized. Addiction is a complex and insidious force that touches every aspect of the human experience. It begins often as a response to discomfort or pain, an attempt to numb, escape, or momentarily distract ourselves from something within us that feels intolerable. Whether it's the sharp sting of emotional anguish, the weight of overwhelming thoughts, or the emptiness that arises from unfulfilled desires, the initial draw toward a substance or behavior may seem like a simple solution to a complex problem. At first, the relief may be genuine. The mind is calmed, the pain is dulled, or the chaos is temporarily quieted. For a moment, there is respite from the relentless storm of thoughts, fears, and desires that consume us. But this temporary relief soon becomes a trap. The mind and body begin to crave the sensation, the release, the escape. What started as a choice, however desperate, becomes an overwhelming need. The substance or behavior that once provided a brief comfort becomes the very thing that feeds the cycle of addiction, perpetuating a false sense of control. The addiction deepens, and we find ourselves caught in a spiral where each attempt to satisfy the craving only strengthens the hold it has over us. In this cycle, the addictive behavior becomes more than just a coping mechanism, it becomes a central aspect of life. What once was a means to an end now defines our existence. Our sense of self, our relationships, and our goals become increasingly intertwined with the addiction, often overshadowing everything else. The very thing that was supposed to offer relief ends up distorting our perception of reality. We begin to identify with the addiction itself, losing sight of the person we were before it took root, and we forget that we are not defined by our cravings or our actions. The addiction is no longer something we do, it becomes something we are. Addiction in this sense is not merely a physical dependence on a substance, but a deep psychological and emotional entanglement. The mind, in its search for meaning or relief, creates a false belief that this external thing, the drug, the behavior, the substance, holds the key to our happiness, our peace, or our sense of self-worth. We begin to believe that we cannot live without it, that we are incomplete without it. And as we chase this belief, we lose touch with the truth that everything we seek externally is already within us. The addiction feeds on this belief, creating an ever-expanding gap between our true self and the illusions we have come to depend on. The nature of addiction is ultimately a deep disconnection from ourselves, from our true desires, and from the present moment. Rather than confronting the discomfort within us, we turn outward seeking something to fill the void. In the pursuit of this external relief, we disconnect from the inner peace that resides in every human being waiting patiently to be acknowledged. What addiction reveals is not just our dependence on an external substance or activity, but the underlying need for reconnection with ourselves, with our deeper purpose, and with the present moment. The struggle is not about the substance itself, but about the underlying disconnection that it represents. Addiction's impact is far-reaching and profound, affecting every layer of the individual's life, from their physical health to their emotional well-being, their relationships, and their sense of self. While the immediate effects are often visible, the deterioration of the body, the loss of mental clarity, and the physical dependence on a substance, the deeper consequences are much harder to see and even more difficult to address. Addiction creates a profound rupture within us, severing the connection to our own true nature and distorting the way we engage with the world around us. On a physical level, addiction wears down the body. The substance or behavior that once offered escape begins to erode vital systems, causing harm to organs, nervous systems, and overall health. Over time, the body becomes less resilient, weakened by the very thing that was initially sought for comfort or relief. The energy that could have been used to engage in life, to create, to experience, and to grow is instead spent in the pursuit of the next high, the next fix, the next escape. The physical toll becomes undeniable, yet the compulsion remains, often stronger than any awareness of the damage being done. But perhaps the more devastating impact of addiction lies in its psychological and emotional consequences. Addiction creates a pervasive cloud of confusion and distortion in the mind. Thoughts become obsessed with the need for the substance or behavior, and everything else fades into the background. This narrowing of focus creates a kind of tunnel vision where the addict's sense of reality becomes warped, prioritizing the next moment of relief over all else. Rational thinking, decision-making, and self-control are eroded. The mind becomes trapped in a cycle of craving and temporary satisfaction, without any lasting resolution or peace. Emotionally, addiction deepens feelings of isolation and disconnection. The individual begins to withdraw from relationships, unable to be present with others in any meaningful way. The emotional energy that would have been invested in friendships, family, or personal growth is redirected toward maintaining the addiction. Love, compassion, and empathy give way to shame, guilt, and anxiety as the addict is increasingly aware of the toll the addiction is taking on themselves and those around them. The guilt of betraying oneself and the people who care about them can feel insurmountable, but rather than addressing this pain, the individual often seeks even more escape, compounding the emotional damage. At its core, addiction causes a profound disconnection from one's own identity. The individual, once a whole and integrated being, becomes fragmented. The addict no longer recognizes who they were before the addiction took hold, and often they are unable to imagine a version of themselves that exists beyond it. The addiction becomes the lens through which they see the world and themselves, shaping their sense of worth, purpose, and capability. They may feel unworthy of anything better, trapped in a false narrative that they are defined by their cravings, their mistakes, or their inability to break free. In this sense, addiction is not just a physical or psychological problem, it becomes an identity crisis where the true self is buried beneath layers of self-doubt, shame, and self-destructive behavior. On a broader level, addiction impacts not just the individual but their family, friends, and community. Relationships that once brought joy and support now become strained as loved ones struggle to understand or cope with the addict's behavior. Trust is broken, and feelings of resentment and helplessness can take root. The addict, in turn, feels increasingly alienated, reinforcing the cycle of isolation. Over time, the very fabric of family and community can begin to fray as addiction pulls everyone involved further into a web of denial, secrecy, and dysfunction. Perhaps most profoundly, addiction disrupts the ability to be fully present in life. The addict's focus is consumed with the craving for relief or the avoidance of discomfort. This constant seeking, this constant chasing of something outside of themselves prevents them from truly experiencing life as it is. They miss out on the richness of the present moment, the beauty of simple experiences, the joy of connection, the peace that comes from being fully immersed in the now. Instead, their energy is drained by the endless pursuit of something that will never satisfy, that will always be just out of reach. In every way, addiction robs the individual of their ability to experience life in its fullness. It strips them of their potential, their vitality, and their capacity for joy. It is a thief that steals not just physical health, but emotional well-being, relational harmony, and spiritual peace. It leaves a wake of destruction in its path, often leaving the addict and those they love struggling to rebuild what has been lost. Introspection, at its core, is the willingness to look inward, to turn our attention away from the external world, and to examine our own thoughts, emotions, and patterns of behavior. It is a deeply personal and sometimes uncomfortable process, one that asks us to confront the very things we often avoid. In the face of addiction or any form of suffering, introspection becomes the key that unlocks the door to self-awareness, self-understanding, and ultimately healing. In addiction, the external world often becomes overwhelming. We look for answers in the substances we consume, the relationships we cling to, or the distractions we create. These external solutions can offer temporary relief, but they do not address the root cause of our suffering. The external world, in many ways, becomes a reflection of our inner turmoil, a projection of the unresolved conflict, pain, or emptiness within us. Introspection, however, calls us to stop looking outward and begin the difficult journey of looking within. It is in the stillness of introspection that we begin to see clearly. By turning our focus inward, we can start to understand the deeper motivations behind our actions, the hidden fears that drive our behavior, and the patterns of thought that have kept us stuck in cycles of self-destruction. We come to recognize that addiction is not merely a physical need for a substance or behavior, but a deeper, more profound yearning to fill an inner void. We may be running away from unresolved pain, trauma, or unmet emotional needs, but until we confront these things directly, we will continue to seek escape in whatever form we can find it. Introspection asks us to pause, to examine the things we have been avoiding, and to open ourselves to the discomfort of truth. This process of self-examination is not about judgment or self-condemnation. It is not an opportunity to berate ourselves for our mistakes or failures. Rather, introspection is about cultivating awareness and understanding. It is about recognizing that the patterns we have been caught in, whether in addiction or other aspects of life, are often rooted in deeper fears or unresolved wounds. These patterns are not who we are, but rather they are reactions to the pain we have not yet addressed. Through introspection, we create space for healing to begin, because it is only when we understand the root of our suffering that we can begin to address it. At the heart of introspection is the willingness to be vulnerable, to sit with the discomfort, the uncertainty, and the raw emotions that arise. It is about having the courage to face the parts of ourselves we have been taught to suppress or ignore. Often the hardest part of introspection is not the answers we uncover, but the acceptance of those answers. We may discover that we have been running from deep-seated pain, that we have been using substances or behaviors as a shield against our own vulnerability. This recognition is not a reason for shame, but an opportunity to reclaim our power, to recognize that we have the capacity to heal and to make different choices moving forward. Introspection also helps us understand the nature of our cravings and desires. We may believe that addiction is about the need for the substance itself, but through introspection we can begin to unravel the deeper emotional and psychological drivers behind the addiction. Is it loneliness we are trying to numb? Is it an underlying sense of inadequacy or fear of failure? Is it the desire to escape from a painful reality we are not yet ready to face? When we begin to identify these underlying causes, we can start to address them directly, whether through therapy, meditation, self-compassion, or other forms of healing. Understanding why we seek what we seek allows us to make conscious choices instead of being driven by unconscious patterns of behavior. Moreover, introspection reveals our innate ability to cultivate awareness and presence. It teaches us that, regardless of the external circumstances or challenges we face, we always have the power to choose how we respond. Addiction often keeps us trapped in unconscious patterns, reacting impulsively, seeking relief and running away from discomfort. But introspection gives us the space to pause, to recognize the craving as it arises and to choose not to act on it. This awareness is the beginning of freedom from the compulsion to act based on automatic habits and a return to conscious living. At its deepest level, introspection connects us to the true source of healing. In the process of self-examination, we are reminded that we are more than our cravings, our fears, or our past. We are, at our core, beings of infinite potential, capable of transformation and growth. When we begin to look inward, we are not simply seeking answers to our problems, we are rediscovering the truth of who we are. This truth is not something to be found outside ourselves, but something that resides within us always, waiting to be acknowledged and embraced. In addiction, introspection is the doorway to self-liberation. It is the starting point from which the journey of recovery begins. It requires patience, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. Through introspection, we come to understand that the healing process is not about erasing the past or escaping from our pain, but about learning to live in alignment with our true self, present, whole, and free. As we stand at the crossroads of our lives, the path to healing, to freedom from addiction, and to rediscovering balance begins with one simple yet profound act: introspection. It is not the external world that holds the answers to our suffering, but the inner landscape we often fear to explore. In our willingness to turn inward, we uncover the roots of our struggles, the patterns that bind us, and the truth of our own potential. The road ahead may not be easy, but it is through this inner exploration that we regain our connection to the peace, strength, and wisdom that reside within us all. It is through introspection that we can break the chains of addiction, heal our wounds, and return to a state of balance and presence in our lives. So let us begin today. Let us approach our struggles not with judgment or avoidance, but with the courage to look within, to understand, and to transform. The answers, the healing, and the peace we seek are not out there, they are waiting for us, right here within ourselves. Thank you.